Hey everyone, and welcome to another Chairman of the Board ranking video. This is where I talk about the last 5 new to me board games that I've played and I rank them from my least favourite up to my most favourite. Now before I get started on these 5 games, I want to give a shout out to the show's sponsor, KIENDA.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer, and if you use the link in the show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. At number 5, I have Planted, which is a fairly straightforward drafting and resource management style game where you'll be participating in a closed draft, collecting resources and trying to aim towards these goals that you are drafting. I suppose the cool part of this game is that you can forfeit your turn in the pass and draft in order to claim a new objective card to aim towards, which you'll obviously be collecting these resources for. And you can even collect these kind of engine building style cards to make your other abilities better or more efficient to get resources quicker, and more efficiently. Other than that, there's not too much more I can say. It feels like I've played a lot of games like this, and I suppose my only nitpick would be that it's a little bit too loose for me. I think like you can get too much done. I believe myself and all of my opponents got all of their objectives done each turn. So I tend to like my games a little bit more challenging. Maybe I had a forgiving session, but I did find that left me wanting for more and wanted it to be a little bit more difficult to play. But a fairly nice visual product, nice breezy gameplay, definitely works for what it does. And no real criticism here. I just think that it's maybe a little bit too lightweight for my personal taste. But still, a fairly solid pass and draft resource management style game that is Planted. At number 4, I have The Queen's Necklace. Now this is a difficult one to talk about because there's so much about it that I like, yet there's so many things that let it down in my opinion. If you're not aware of what The Queen's Necklace is, it's a bidding style game as you're bidding on these cards that come up for draft each round, and then you are essentially collecting these different gems and then trying to donate the most gems in a kind of a blind bid to get victory points at whenever a scoring round comes into play. Now, the drafting system or the bidding system, I think, is fairly dated and a bit clunky. So for example, there'll be a number of cards on display and they'll start with these little price tokens on them. And each round a card is neglected, then the prices will shift down, which is fine. But the currency mechanism in this game is what I did not like, because you have 10 kind of virtual coins to spend each turn. And what that means is because of the turn order, sometimes players can get very little bang for their buck. And yet the next player, because of the way the kind of denominations of money filter down, can get so much for their money on their turn. And it's very frustrating when that happens and it doesn't work out in your favour, and it does work out in your opponent's favour. So I would have liked to have seen some mechanism where you can actually carry money from one round to the next, so that you can actually start to build up some funds and get some better cards on your turn. The scoring mechanism in this game is actually really interesting, where you will be participating in this blind bidding system, and what you're trying to do is you're trying to have the majority in these gem types. But the problem is, the more common a gem type is amongst all the players, the less rare it is, or the more common it is, and that'll make the value of those particular sets worth less. So that's a really interesting push and pull, where you want to have the majority, but you don't want to contribute too much, because you'll just make those gems more common and make them worth less victory points. But still, some really cool ideas there. Now, my only other little thing I didn't like was that some of the characters that you could draft, I thought they were a little bit too swingy. You could save them up to the last round and really hurt your opponents and cripple them for what they maybe intended. So I think maybe they could have been a little bit more subtle in the way they worked. But maybe that's more of my personal taste, being more of a Eurogamer. I don't like these big, bombastic, powerful cards that can completely derail the game and hamstring your opponents. But yeah, still a real mixed bag of emotions about this one. So much I liked, so much I didn't like. I would love to see it some more now I know what's going to come up in that deck of cards. But still, it's a clever design, it's an interesting design, but I think those problems I have with it are going to prevent it being, amongst my very favourites. So that is The Queen's Necklace at number 4. At number 3, I have Discordia, which is a medium-weight Euro strategy game with a very cool victory condition. So the idea of this game is that you want to be the first player to get rid of all of your meeples by committing them to different objectives and things and getting them out of your supply. So first off, I love that idea. I love it when games come up with fresh concepts and different ways to tackle the game, essentially. The gameplay here is fairly generic, I think, where you are going to be drafting these dice from this communal board, and that will dictate the actions you can take, such as creating new worker placement spots in order to put commit your workers to them. They come in different colours. You can improve your engine, so when you take particular dice colours or dice values, then you can dispose of even more meeples. So you're constantly getting more efficient. And I do like the unique player boards here, where there's going to be a number of these symbols on them which will show how many more meeples you're taking each round. And the idea is you want to be covering them up as quickly as you can so that you're not getting a surplus of meeples each time. And there's even tracks you can go up to get combos. And I love this kind of this bottom track where they will actually reduce the number of meeples you're intaking each round. So different things you need to manage here. So overall, I did like the idea. I'm a bit concerned that it's a bit of a gimmick rather than being as unique as maybe it tries to make out. Because gameplay-wise, it does feel somewhat similar to a lot of other midweight Euro worker placement, dice drafting style games. So it's a solid game. It definitely works, but I'm not convinced that it's much more than a gimmick, and there's actually not that much variability in terms of mixed setups and things like that. So I liked it. I think it's solid. It's a quintessential 6 out of 10. I think some people are going to be really sold on that meeple shedding mechanism. I liked it, but sometimes it can feel a little bit punishing at times, when they're throwing meeples at you each time, especially at the beginning part of the game when things are moving a bit slower. It feels like you're fighting a real uphill battle. But still, there's some good twists and turns here. There's some good potential to make up ground on if you're falling behind your opponents. In this last game I played, I was very far behind, and you do get rewarded by being first player the next turn, which can actually be really powerful. So this game is quite a strong example of games where turn order is very, very important, because there's normally one ideal spot that you'll want to do in terms of drafting the dice that you want. And if people go before you and they took the dice you want, you're pretty much left with an inferior action to take. But still, that comes part and parcel with games like this. I maybe would have liked to have seen that maybe a little bit mitigatable, but still, that's nitpicking. I liked it. I don't think it's a great one. I think it's a good one. That is Discordia at number 3. At number 2, I have Nocturne. Now, this is more of a family weight style game as you are drafting these tiles using a very cool bidding system. It's a system that was actually, I believe, stolen from another game called Metropolis, which has also been recently repackaged as High Rise, I believe. So this is a game where you have a big grid of these tiles. Each turn, you are going to be, the starting player is going to start their bid on a particular tile. And then in order for the other players to become involved and raise the bid, they are going to have to choose an adjacent tile to the one that's already been bid for. So if you're raising the bid, you are not raising the bid on the tile that the previous player chose. So you're kind of navigating around this bid until nobody is willing to increase that value anymore. You'll claim those tiles. Those tiles will score based on very simple set collection mechanisms. The most of these have 2 of these. The more of these, the merrier, and so on. But I do like this game-in-game system where when you claim a tile, you'll be putting one of your tokens on there, and they can contribute to other goals that you're trying to aim towards, such as having particular shapes created, you're trying to control different areas, that kind of thing. So again, I tend to like games that have systems within systems, and this is a nice clean example of that. And there's also some quite cool incentives in terms of holding back on placing your bigger bids out there, because if you have the higher value tokens left behind, you can get some really powerful tokens next turn and hopefully get the exact tiles that you want. So a really well polished game. I don't think it's going to set the world on fire, but again, I like to see those mechanisms well integrated, well harmonized, and this game definitely showcases that. So I think this one's going to be very appealing to a lot of people. It's got lovely artwork and simple but interesting mechanisms, and I think it's going to do quite well long term. So that is Nocturne at number 2. And finally, at number 1, I have Katarenga, which is a 2-player only abstract strategy game, and this is a variant on chess. Now, I've probably lost a lot of your guys' attention by now, but I'm really getting into these games at the moment, so you'll probably see a few of these games popping up on future lists. But this one, as I said, is a chess variant, but you only have, I believe, 8 pieces each, and they're all of the same type. And the board itself is made up of all these different coloured squares, and each colour is going to dictate the move that those pawns can make as long as you're stood on that particular spot. Now, the idea of the game is to try and get at least 2 of your pawns over and past your opponent's side of the board. And it has a great degree of foreplanning because you can see all of the potential moves that your opponents can make. You can plan moves in advance. You know, you're going to go here, then I'm going to plan to go here, and so on. But it's not overwhelming, say to the point that chess is, where there's so many variables. At this one, you know, you can very clearly get a nice scope of the board, see what all the potential moves are, keep your pieces safe, try to trap your opponents, that kind of thing. Even try to win games or kind of wars of attrition to try chip off your player pieces or your opponent's player pieces in order to, you know, whittle them down and then win that way. Very interesting. Different board states all the time because these different squares are variable. So, you know, each setup is going to be different, create different opportunities. And for me, this has a real addictive quality to it. The stakes feel much lower than a game like chess. Games are only about 10 minutes long, yet still they feel crunchy and thinky. And yeah, I'm absolutely loving this game at the moment. I think it's fantastic. One of the best games I've played this year, actually. And it's going to be a candidate to being one of my favourite 2-player games of the year for sure. So that is Katarenga. I definitely recommend checking this one out if you're a fan of abstract strategy games and, of course, if you're a fan of chess. So that's Katarenga at number 1. So that concludes the video. Generally a high quality bunch of games here with some highs and lows, of course. But if you have enjoyed the video, please be sure to hit like and subscribe to the channel and check out my other content too. But for everybody else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye-bye.